A black teen sits quietly in first class. He has his boarding pass, his name is on the seat, and yet, within minutes, he's surrounded, questioned, and forced to move. Not because he broke the rules, not because of his behavior, but because someone decided he didn't belong. What if that seat wasn't just leather and space, but a symbol? What if the boy's father wasn't just watching, but owned the airline? And what if, 5 minutes later, the plane was grounded not out of revenge, but out of something deeper, dignity? This isn't just a story about race. It's about silence, power, legacy, and the quiet strength it takes to stay calm when the world demands you disappear. What does it mean to belong? Who gets to decide where we sit, and why, and how far would a father go to protect not just his son's seat, but his soul? This is the story of Mellick Cross. And by the end, the sky itself will never look the same. Before we begin, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel, so more stories like this find the people who need to hear them. Now, let's take our seat. Seattle-Tacoma International Airport smelled faintly of roasted espresso beans and jet fuel. It was late afternoon, but the clouds outside made it feel like dusk had already settled over the terminal. Mellick Avery Cross stood at gate B-22, quietly shifting the strap of his leather carry-on as he glanced up at the flight display. Horizon Atlantic Airways, Flight 227 to Boston on time. He inhaled through his nose, slow and measured, then exhaled. No rush. He always arrived 2 hours early, just like his dad taught him. Be early, be invisible, and let your presence speak for itself. Mellick was 17, tall for his age, with skin the color of polished walnut and dark curls neatly twisted back. He wore navy chinos, a fitted white Oxford, and a slate-gray bomber jacket zipped halfway. Nothing flashy, just sharp enough to not be mistaken for someone he wasn't. He looked down at his boarding pass again, then at his phone. Seat 2A, first class. His thumb hovered over a text bubble. Mom, let me know once you board. Call if you need anything. Love you, he typed, lining up now. All good, then hit send. The boarding announcement crackled through the speaker overhead. Now boarding our first-class passengers for Flight 227 to Boston. Please proceed to the priority lane. Mellick adjusted the strap of his bag again, stepped forward, and offered his ticket to the gate agent, a woman in her 40s with clipped blonde hair and a slightly distracted expression. She barely glanced at the boarding pass. Young man, this is first-class boarding. Economy will begin in a few minutes, she said without looking up. I know, Mellick replied calmly. I'm in 2A. Her brows pinched together. She took the boarding pass again, this time holding it up to the light like it might reveal a hidden watermark. Oh, she mumbled. Well, okay. Then, proceed. Her tone was one Mellick had heard before, cautious disbelief painted over with faux politeness. He said nothing, just nodded, stepped past the gate, and walked toward the jet bridge. The corridor narrowed as he entered the aircraft. The familiar rush of cool air conditioning and overhead lighting greeted him. A tall flight attendant stood at the front galley, greeting passengers with a manufactured smile. Her name tag read Vanessa. She caught sight of him and smiled. Then her smile vanished. She subtly shifted her stance, blocking the aisle with her body. Hi there, she said, her voice still pleasant. Can I help you find your seat? I'm in 2A. She blinked. Are you sure that's a first-class seat? He held out his boarding pass without flinching. Yes, ma'am. It's right here. Vanessa took the slip and scanned it for an uncomfortably long moment. Her lips tightened. She glanced up and down the aisle. No one else was boarding yet. "Where did you get this?" she asked. "Quieter now." "I booked it online. My dad paid for it." Her eyes narrowed slightly. Just for a moment. "Well, I'm going to need to check something. Just wait here." She turned and walked up the aisle, disappearing behind the curtain that separated the galley from the flight deck. Malik stood alone at the threshold of first class. A few early passengers seated in rows 1 and 2 glanced over at him, then quickly looked away. The air felt thinner. He could feel every second stretch longer than it should. He wasn't surprised. Not really. But he still felt that old ache, the one that came when people assumed, without saying, that he didn't belong. He pressed his lips together, resisting the urge to clench his jaw. Vanessa returned with another crew member, a man in his 50s with a buzz cut and a clipboard. His name tag read Troy. "Son," Troy said, stepping in front of him. "We're going to need you to step aside for a moment. There may have been a glitch in the ticketing system." "No glitch," Malik said softly. "The boarding pass is real. I paid well. My father paid for seat 2A. Troy didn't even look at the ticket. We'll get this sorted. Just move to the side for now." Malik didn't move. There was a weight in his chest now. Not anger. Not yet. Just a quiet resistance, like holding your breath underwater, waiting for the right moment to surface. "I'd prefer to stay where I am," he said. Vanessa folded her arms. "We have procedures," she snapped. "You'll need to wait in the jet bridge while we verify this. We can't hold up boarding." The pressure in Malik's ribs grew tighter. "Is anyone else being asked to step off?" Vanessa hesitated. Troy cleared his throat. "We've had a few incidents of fraudulent boarding passes. We're just being cautious." The curtain behind them rustled. A passenger in 1A, an older man with wire-rimmed glasses and salt-and-pepper hair, turned toward the scene. "Is there a problem?" he asked. "No problem, sir," Troy replied quickly. The man's voice was even. "Then why is the young man being singled out?" Vanessa's lips pressed together. Malik saw her glance at the phone in the passenger's hand. He had just started recording. Malik took a breath. The air still felt thinner than it should. "I'm not trying to cause a scene," he said. "But I've done nothing wrong. I've complied. I've shown my pass. If there's an issue, maybe you could look it up instead of asking me to step off the plane." The tension rose like a quiet elevator. Vanessa stepped aside just an inch. She wasn't expecting him to push back. Not like this. Troy turned slightly, radioing someone outside the plane. "Can we get a gate agent back here? Passenger verification needed." Malik's fingers tapped once against his thigh. He closed his eyes, then opened them again. He didn't want to call his father. Not yet. But if they tried to move him again, he might not have a choice. Malik didn't sit. He stood near the first-class row, gripping the shoulder strap of his carry-on bag and watching the crew like he was studying a slow-moving storm. Vanessa had returned to her galley station, though she kept shooting glances in his direction. Troy, the supervisor, spoke into his radio. Short-clipped words that weren't meant for anyone else to hear. The energy in the cabin was shifting. You could feel it in the way heads turned and turned back, how voices dropped, and how the hum of the plane's air system suddenly seemed louder than conversation. The plane wasn't even half boarded yet. Passenger 1A, Dr. Colin Everett, was still watching from behind his glasses, one hand gently resting on the armrest, the other holding his phone in plain sight. Malik lowered his bag and exhaled slowly. Not in anger, just to regulate himself. He could already feel his chest tightening with the familiar weight of unwanted attention, of being seen and not seen at the same time. He wanted to believe this would de-escalate, that someone would look at the system and realize the boarding pass was valid, that maybe Troy would say, "Oh, looks like you're all set. Sorry for the delay." But something told him that wasn't the way this was going to play out. 2 new passengers boarded and passed by, a white couple in their mid-30s. The woman offered Malik a quick glance and a tight smile. The man barely noticed him at all. When they reached their seats in row 2, Malik realized the woman's ticket had been for 2B, his seatmate. She glanced back at him again, curious now. Vanessa approached with a faint smile stretched across her face like a mask too tight. Her voice was dipped in professional sweetness. "Sir, we've spoken with the gate, and unfortunately, we're unable to verify this boarding pass at this time. I'm going to have to ask you to step into the jet bridge so we can resolve the issue." Malik looked at her, carefully, measured. "I've already shown my boarding pass," he said, calm and firm. "I've shown my ID. I have nothing more to prove. Why am I being asked to leave the plane?" Vanessa's smile twitched. "It's not about you personally. This is a matter of protocol. If you continue refusing to cooperate, we may have to involve airport security." The words didn't sting. Not anymore. Malik had grown used to them. Always masked his policy. Always wrapped in a layer of plausible deniability. But something in his chest flinched. Not out of fear, but because this moment was not unfamiliar. It had just never happened so publicly before. The woman in 2B was now clearly listening. The man in 3C opened his phone and began filming as well. Troy returned, this time standing directly in front of Malik. His voice was low, but his posture was aggressive. "Young man, I'm not going to argue with you. Step off the aircraft now or security will be involved." A beat of silence passed. Malik didn't move. "Doctor," Everett stood up from his seat. "This is unacceptable," he said, voice steady. "He hasn't done anything. He hasn't even raised his voice. You've been talking circles around him while ignoring the fact that his pass is in order." Troy turned, trying to control the situation. "Sir, please remain seated." "No, Doctor," Everett said. "Not when I'm watching this happen right in front of me. Not when a 17-year-old is being publicly shamed for trying to sit in a seat he paid for." Vanessa stepped in. "Sir, we're handling the situation." "No. Doctor," Everett repeated. "You're amplifying it." More passengers were looking now, not just first class. Economy rows had started to fill. A murmur traveled through the cabin like a wind catching dry leaves. Cell phones were up. At least 3 cameras were pointed toward the standoff. Vanessa turned to Troy, voice tight now. "Call them." Troy nodded, pulled out his radio, and said quietly, "We need security to board. Passenger refusal." Malik didn't flinch. He simply reached for his phone. He didn't want to do it. He didn't want to call his father. But as he stared at Troy's clenched jaw and Vanessa's polite hostility, as he felt the pressure of everyone watching, judging, filming, he knew the line had been crossed. It wasn't about embarrassment anymore. It was about principle. He unlocked his phone. The home screen lit up with the background photo of him and his younger sister, Naomi, at her spelling bee last spring. She was hugging him, grinning with braces and glasses. The photo had always made him feel grounded. He opened his contacts and scrolled to the top. Dad, Dorian Cross. He hovered his thumb above the call button. He hesitated. Was it too much? Would his father think he was overreacting? Would he regret pulling that lever? He felt the pressure of 1,000 thoughts swirl behind his ribs, but beneath them, a quieter voice rose. "You didn't do anything wrong, and you don't owe them Your silence. He tapped the call button. It rang once, twice. Then a voice echoed from behind him. Officers on board. 2 TSA agents stepped through the aircraft door, scanning the cabin. One was tall, mid-40s, Latino, square-jawed with a calm face. Officer Ramon Ellis. The other was younger, white, clearly less experienced. Officer Dana Reeves. Troy pointed. That's the passenger. Ellis stepped forward. Calm, careful. Sir, can I see your boarding pass and ID? Malik handed both over without a word. His phone was still pressed to his shoulder. The call was still ringing. Ellis examined the pass, then the ID, then back to Malik's face. These look in order, he said. Seat 2A, valid ID, valid pass. Troy frowned. Vanessa stepped forward again. With respect, officer, we've seen very sophisticated fakes lately. The boarding pass looks off, and the way he's dressed, it doesn't match. A pause filled the air like pressure before a storm. Doesn't match what Ellis asked, eyes narrowing slightly. Vanessa hesitated. He's a minor. Alone. First class. It's unusual. The phone in Malik's hand stopped ringing, then started again. Incoming call. Daddy answered. Hey, Malik said quietly. I'm sorry to bother you, but there's a situation on the plane. They won't let me sit in my seat. There was a pause on the other end, then a deep voice. Are you okay? I'm fine, Malik replied. But I need you to talk to someone. I'm putting you on speaker. The atmosphere changed like someone flipped a switch. The calm in Malik's voice, the certainty in his movement, it was no longer the sound of a teenager defending himself. It was something else, something deeper, something that demanded attention. He pressed speakerphone. This is Dorian Cross, the voice said over the line. Firm, but clear. I'd like to speak with the lead crew member currently confronting my son. Vanessa's eyes went wide. Troy went pale. Doctor? Everett sat back slowly, his lips curling into a knowing smile. Officer Ellis raised his eyebrows. I'm sorry, Vanessa said, stammering. Did you say... Cross as in... CEO of Aurora Atlantic? Malik didn't answer. He didn't need to. The silence answered for him. Vanessa Lang's mouth opened, but no sound came out. The name hung in the air like a dropped glass that hadn't shattered yet. Dorian Cross. The voice on speaker was calm, measured, unmistakably in control. This is Dorian Cross. I've been informed my son is being detained on board Flight 227. I need to speak with your lead flight attendant immediately. Vanessa's hand trembled slightly as she reached for the phone. Sir, she stammered, this is Vanessa Lang. I'm the cabin lead. We were just following procedure. We didn't realize you didn't realize what... Ms. Lang, the voice asked. Still calm, still professional, but every syllable was sharpened by quiet authority. That he was your son, Vanessa whispered, eyes flicking to Malik. There was a pause on the line. I see, Dorian replied, and if he weren't my son, would this treatment still be appropriate? Vanessa looked as if the floor had vanished beneath her feet. Troy Beckett stepped in, trying to regain control. Mr. Cross, this is Troy Beckett, Gate Operations Supervisor. We were attempting to verify a suspicious boarding situation. Nothing personal, sir. There was confusion at the gate. Suspicious, Dorian's voice cut in. Your team had a boarding pass. A valid government-issued ID. What exactly was suspicious? Mr. Beckett. Troy hesitated. Well, the circumstances. He's a minor. Alone. The attire. We've had instances of fraud. A beat of silence passed. Malik didn't speak. He didn't move. He simply stood, Phone held out. Eyes locked on the man who had just tried to remove him. Dr. Everett and 1A leaned forward again, this time whispering something to the passenger beside him. Mr. Beckett, Dorian said, his tone now steely. I am grounding this flight until this situation is properly resolved. I've already contacted tower operations. You are not cleared for departure. Several gays echoed from rows behind them. Vanessa looked around the cabin. Passengers were now fully engaged, phones up, cameras on. A group of college students in row 4 were live streaming. One of them whispered, Yo, that's the CEO of the airline. This is going viral. Troy's radio crackled. Gate B-22 tower requesting immediate status update. Flight 227 is past slot. Confirm hold order from executive command. Troy's voice faltered. Confirmed. Holding per Mr. Cross. Vanessa backed away slowly. Malik could feel the pressure lifting from his shoulders, but not entirely. He was still standing, still exposed, still under the kind of scrutiny that made you forget how to breathe deeply. Officer Ellis glanced at Malik, then at the flight crew, then back to the phone. Mr. Cross, this is Officer Ramon Ellis with TSA. He said, I've personally verified your son's documentation. Everything is in order. No threat detected. We were called under the assumption of possible fraud. That assumption appears unfounded. Dorian's voice softened just a touch. Thank you, officer. I appreciate your professionalism. Vanessa held the phone awkwardly, then passed it back to Malik. He took it silently. I'm okay, Malik said into the phone. Are you sure? Dorian asked. Malik paused. I think I will be, but I don't want to just move on from this. There was another silence. Then Dorian said quietly, You don't have to. We'll address it. Let me handle the outside. You hold your ground on the inside. Malik nodded slightly. Copy. He ended the call. It was only then that he noticed his hands were shaking, not from fear, from restraint. He had kept his tone level, his eyes dry, his words few, but inside, his pulse was hammering. Not because of the confrontation itself, but because of how close it had come to turning ugly. All it would have taken was one sharp word, one flinch, one raised voice. He sat down in 2A without waiting for permission. Vanessa hovered for a moment, as if unsure whether to say something, but she didn't. She just walked back to the galley, head down. Troy whispered something into his radio and exited the aircraft. Officer Ellis lingered for a few seconds longer. Malik, right, he asked gently. Yeah, sir. You did good. Malik gave a small nod, too tired to say more. The younger officer, Dana Reeves, looked like she wanted to say something too, but instead followed her partner off the plane. The cabin remained hushed for several minutes. Boarding resumed, but the air had changed. There was no chatter, just the hum of equipment, the occasional ding of the seatbelt sign, and the soft thump of luggage being stowed. Malik pulled out his phone again. He didn't scroll. He didn't check notifications. He opened notes and began typing. Don't forget what this felt like. Not the humiliation, the restraint, the weight, the silence before you spoke, the way eyes shift when truth becomes undeniable. You didn't yell. You didn't run. You stood. That matters. A gentle voice interrupted his thoughts. Excuse me, said the woman in 2B. Would you like to switch seats? I don't mind taking the window if you'd rather not be beside the aisle. Malik looked at her, surprised. She wasn't smiling out of pity, just kindness. No, thank you, he said. I'm fine here. She nodded and turned her attention back to her book. From several rows behind, Someone began clapping. Not loud, just a slow, steady rhythm. Others joined in. It wasn't wild applause. It wasn't a protest cheer. It was acknowledgement. Dr. Everett stood briefly and gave a small nod to Mullick before sitting again. The sound faded out after 10 seconds. Then the cabin fell quiet again. Mullick felt his phone buzz. A new text. Naomi, Mom says you haven't called. What's going on? Everything okay? He stared at the message for a long time before typing. Yeah, everything's different now. But I'm okay. He hit send, leaned his head back, and closed his eyes. But he didn't sleep. Mullick sat still in his seat. The cabin lights dimmed as more passengers filtered in. Flight 227 was nearly full now. The plane felt smaller than it had an hour ago. Yet the space around him stretched like he existed inside a spotlight no one had turned off. Every sound was louder. Every movement carried weight. Vanessa hadn't looked at him again. She moved robotically, managing the front cabin with the precision of someone clinging to procedure like a raft. Her eyes scanned boarding passes. Her voice was steady, even friendly again, but the warmth was gone. She looked like she was trying to forget she had ever seen him. Troy hadn't returned. That, Mullick assumed, was no coincidence. He stared out the window, but it was nothing more than a reflection now. Outside was a blur of tarmac lights and luggage carts, moving like distant constellations, but inside, everything was too sharp. He could feel the eyes behind him. Not all, not even most. Just a few, watching, evaluating, wondering if he'd make another move, or worse, if he'd overreacted. He wasn't sure which burden was heavier, the humiliation of being challenged for simply existing in first class, or the pressure to appear composed afterward. Because now he wasn't just a teenager in seat 2A. He was a symbol, and that terrified him. The woman in 2B gave him a soft glance now and then, but she didn't speak. She seemed to understand that he didn't need conversation, just space. Vanessa passed by again. Mullick noticed her pause slightly as she approached, but she didn't speak to him. Not a word, no apology, no acknowledgement, not even eye contact. It shouldn't have surprised him, but it did. He wondered what she was thinking, whether she regretted it or just regretted getting caught. There was a part of him that wanted to believe she hadn't meant to hurt him, that she had simply been conditioned by years of silent rules, the kind of rules that whisper things like, "Watch that one closely or he doesn't belong." But another part of him, the part that had been here before, knew exactly what had happened, and that part wasn't interested in soft excuses. The announcement buzzed to life above him. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. We apologize for the delay. We've been asked to hold departure by corporate until further instruction. We'll keep you updated as soon as we receive clearance from ground control. Thank you for your patience." Mullick leaned back, eyes closed. He could hear murmurs through the curtain, words like CEO, son, and live stream floated like static. He checked his phone. Messages had begun to trickle in. Maya Jensen, one of the passengers in economy, had posted the video online. She didn't know Mullick's name, but she'd captioned it. They tried to kick a black teen out of first class. Then he called his dad, the CEO. Views 11 Thorns. He felt his throat tighten. The video was spreading. He didn't know if he was ready for that. He didn't ask to become a story. He just wanted to fly, to get from Seattle to Boston, to check into the dorms early, to walk through the campus he'd dreamed about since junior high. He didn't want to be a headline, but that choice had been taken from him the moment someone looked at him and assumed he was out of place. The curtain rustled again. "Doctor," Everett leaned forward slightly from his seat. "May I?" he asked gently. Malik nodded. The older man turned toward him, hands folded, voice low. "You handled that with restraint I've rarely seen, especially at your age." "Didn't feel like restraint," Malik replied. "Felt like drowning." "Doctor," Everett tilted his head. "But you didn't drown. You stood." Malik looked down at his hands, fingers curled slightly on the armrest. "I didn't want to call him," he said. "I really didn't. You shouldn't have had to. Doctor." Everett answered. There was a long pause between them. The quiet wasn't awkward. It was reverent. Then Malik asked, "Why do people think silence means weakness?" "Doctor," Everett smiled faintly. "Because they've confused loudness with strength for so long. They've forgotten how powerful stillness can be." Malik breathed in, then out, slowly. He thought about all the times he'd stayed silent before, all the times he let it slide. The assumptions, the comments, the small, sharp jabs disguised as jokes. He had always let it go, always kept his head down. But today, it had crossed a line. Maybe not because it was worse than what he'd experienced before, but because this time, it was public, and something about being stripped of your place, right there in front of strangers, makes the weight heavier, makes the silence feel like complicity. He looked back at Dr. Everett. "Thank you," he said. The man nodded. "Don't thank me. I didn't do anything brave." "You did." Malik didn't respond. He just let the words settle. The PA system chimed again. "Ladies and gentlemen, we'll be closing the main cabin door shortly. Please ensure all electronic devices are in airplane mode and seatbelts are fastened. We appreciate your patience." Malik glanced at the window again. Rain had begun to trace soft lines down the glass. A flight attendant, not Vanessa, walked down the aisle with a tablet. She paused at Malik's row. "Mr. Cross," she said politely. "Corporate would like to offer you a written statement of apology, to be emailed after takeoff, and an invitation to speak directly with leadership upon arrival. Would that be acceptable?" Malik stared at her. Her tone was kind, her face open, but still. It felt scripted, calculated. He nodded once. "Okay." The attendant tapped something on her tablet and moved on. He could hear whispers again. A young man in row 4 muttered, "That kid's changing the whole flight." He felt the truth of it hit. Not the praise, the pressure. He had become a mirror, and the thing about mirrors is they make people see things they'd rather ignore. He opened his notebook and wrote one line across the page. "What you allow once becomes your future." He didn't know where the words came from, but they felt honest, raw. He closed the notebook and tucked it back into his bag. The engines rumbled to life beneath him. The cabin lights dimmed further. The plane began to taxi. As it turned slowly toward the runway, Malik leaned his head against the window. Rain dotted the glass. He wasn't angry. He was awake. The plane began to roll slowly toward the runway, tires humming beneath the weight of everyone watching, waiting, and wondering what kind of flight this was going to be. Malik sat motionless in 2A, chin resting lightly against the side of the seat. His fingers tapped slowly against the armrest in no rhythm at all. He could feel something in his chest. Not anxiety. Not quite. It was more like an ache. A low-pressure system of thoughts that wouldn't clear. The events of the last hour kept replaying. The look on Vanessa's face when she assumed he didn't belong. The way Troy spoke with certainty, as if Malik's very presence needed to be defended. And even the moment with his dad, Dorian's voice steady, composed, wielding power like a quiet storm. Somehow even that left Malik feeling disoriented, like all of it had happened to someone else. He didn't know if he wanted to cry or scream or disappear. Instead, he just breathed. Slowly. The captain's voice came back over the intercom, steady and smooth. Flight 227 is now cleared for takeoff. Please ensure your seat backs are upright and tray tables stowed. Flight attendants, prepare for departure. Vanessa walked briskly down the aisle without looking at him. She did the final safety checks like a machine, efficient but expressionless. When she reached row 2, she glanced at Malik for the briefest second. That glance was enough. It wasn't anger. It was shame. Not regret. Not compassion. Just the bare recognition of being caught doing something unjust. Malik looked away. The engine surged. The plane tilted slightly back, and the ground gave way. As the aircraft lifted off, so did the tension in the cabin, or perhaps it was only the illusion of release. After all, the problem wasn't left behind on the tarmac. It was strapped into seat 2A, watching clouds form beneath him. At cruising altitude, the seatbelt sign chimed off. Passengers stirred. A few conversations resumed. But the normal rhythm of a flight never really returned. It was as if everyone sensed this wasn't an ordinary journey anymore. Malik opened his phone again. The video had passed 73,000 views. He stared at it, hesitant. He had become a face, a symbol, a story people would argue about. And he hadn't even said 10 words in the clip. He noticed a notification from a private number. It was a message forwarded from his dad's assistant. Aurora Atlantic Media Office. We are aware of the developing situation regarding the events on Flight 227. A full internal review is underway. CEO Dorian Cross is personally engaged. We encourage respectful dialogue and are committed to accountability. Malik blinked. His life had become a press release. He set the phone down, unsure what to do with the feeling building in his chest, like a scream he had no intention of letting out. But that kept rising anyway. The woman in 2B spoke gently. Would you like a snack? I saved the almonds. Everyone else always grabs the cookies. Malik smiled faintly. Thanks, he said. She handed him a small bag, then turned back to her book. The kindness was quiet, uncomplicated. It made him want to cry more than the cruelty had. He looked at her and finally asked, What's your name, Georgia? She said, not looking up. Georgia Linton. I'm Malik. She nodded. I know. He wasn't sure what that meant, but the way she said it, it wasn't about fame. It was about presence. I saw what happened, she added softly. You don't need to say anything. I just want you to know it mattered that you stayed still, that you didn't shrink. Malik nodded, but the words didn't settle. Not yet. They floated in the space between them like paper cranes, delicate, hopeful, and hard to hold on to. Vanessa returned to the front galley. Malik could hear her whispering to another flight attendant behind the curtain. He's just a kid, Vanessa said quietly. I didn't see it. I didn't mean for it to go this far. You should apologize, the other replied. I can't. Not now. Not in front of everyone. Malik's eyes narrowed slightly. So she had the words. She just didn't have the courage. His phone buzzed again. This time it was Naomi, his sister. Naomi 14. Mom says you're on the plane now. What happened? Did someone mess with you? Did Dad flip? He smiled in spite of himself. He replied, Malik, yeah, someone tried. Dad did flip. Don't tell Mom yet. I'll call after we land. Naomi, you okay? He paused, then wrote Malik. Getting there. He closed his eyes, resting the back of his head against the seat. And then, somewhere near 38,000 feet, his mind drifted not into sleep, but into memory. He was 10, at a department store in Portland. He'd wandered a few aisles away from his mom. A store clerk spotted him, called security before even asking his name. They took him to the office in the back and locked the door. Said he looked lost, but treated him like a threat. His mom arrived 15 minutes later, furious, heartbroken. She held his face in both hands and said something he would never forget. "You are not the problem. Their fear is not your fault, but you will be blamed anyway. So carry yourself like someone whose presence is undeniable." He hadn't understood it all then. But now, 17 and exhausted, he understood it perfectly. The flight continued. Vanessa returned with a tray of beverages. She stopped at 2B and poured water for Georgia. Then she looked at Malik. "Would you like anything to drink, sir?" she asked. It was the first time she had used "sir." It felt strange, stiff, practiced. "Water's fine," Malik said. She nodded, set the cup down, and paused. For a second, just a second. Her lips parted like she was going to speak, but nothing came. She turned and walked away. Georgia glanced at Malik, as if to say, "Don't let it shake you." But Malik wasn't shaken anymore. He was tired and aware and ready, not for revenge, but for truth. He reached for his notebook again. This time he didn't write a poem or a reflection. He made a list. Things I will not be ashamed of. 1. My voice. 2. My calm. 3. My blackness. 4. My silence. 5. My father. 6. My right to sit. Then my anger. 8. My forgiveness when earned. 9. My truth when told. 10. My presence everywhere I go. He closed the notebook and looked out at the endless sky. He wasn't just flying now. He was ascending. Malik didn't move for a long time. The hum of the engines filled the cabin like white noise. Some passengers dozed, others typed away on laptops. From the outside, the plane was serene, but inside Malik's chest, a quiet storm still churned. He kept his eyes on the clouds beyond the window. They drifted slowly, heavy with light. What was he now? To some, a teen who made a fuss. To others, a hero for saying nothing. But to himself, he wasn't sure yet. There was a strange loneliness that came with being noticed, not for who you are, but for what happened to you. Malik didn't want to be a headline. He didn't want to be viral. He wanted dignity, not attention. He just wanted to matter before someone had to call his dad to prove it. Vanessa reappeared mid-flight, her tray now empty. This time she paused by his row, pretending to organize a drawer beneath the jump seat. Malik noticed the way her hands fidgeted. She was rehearsing something. He knew that look. Eventually, she turned slightly and spoke. "I didn't mean for things to happen the way they did." Her voice was quiet, strained, like it hurt to admit. Malik stayed still. She continued, forcing herself forward. "I made assumptions. That's clear now. I'm sorry." The words fell like pebbles in a river, small, but they created ripples. Malik looked up at her, not with anger, but with clarity. "What changed?" he asked. Vanessa blinked. "What do you mean you've had 3 hours to say that?" Why now Vanessa's eyes dropped. "I saw the video," she said. "I saw myself. I didn't like what I looked like." Malik held her gaze. "So the apology is for you," Vanessa didn't answer. Her silence was the answer. He nodded once, calmly. "Thank you," he said, "but I didn't need it to know who I am." She opened her mouth again, but thought better of it. She walked away. Georgia, in 2B, whispered just loud enough. Well said. He let out a breath. This was the part no one explained, that the strength it takes to remain composed can feel more exhausting than rage ever could. He leaned back again, watching the overhead map display the plane's location. They were somewhere over Colorado now, just past the Rockies. His phone buzzed again. This time it was from his father. Dorian Cross. I've grounded your flight. You'll make a stop in Chicago. I'll be waiting on the tarmac. Not for damage control, for truth. You okay? Malik stared at the message, stunned. He reread it twice before replying. Malik, you didn't have to do that. Dorian Cross. No, son. I had to. The tone of that reply struck something deeper than the earlier chaos had. His father wasn't acting out of PR panic. He was showing up, not as a CEO, as a father, as someone who'd walked the same path, long before Malik was born. Dorian knew what it meant to be questioned before speaking, dismissed before standing, erased before ever being seen. And now he wasn't going to let that happen to his son, not without the world watching what came next. Malik placed the phone down on his tray table and stared at the seat back in front of him. The words Georgia had spoken earlier echoed again. It mattered that you didn't shrink. He wasn't shrinking now. The captain's voice broke through the cabin again. Ladies and gentlemen, we've been instructed by corporate to make an unscheduled landing in Chicago Midway International. This is not an emergency diversion. Please remain calm. We expect to be on the ground in approximately 42 minutes. Murmurs erupted from across the cabin. What Chicago? Did something happen? I thought this was a direct flight. Malik could feel the questions circling again, but this time he didn't feel small beneath them. He was the reason, and he wasn't ashamed. Georgia turned toward him. Is this about you? She asked gently. He didn't lie. Yes. She nodded once, firmly. Good. Malik was stunned. Good. She smiled. Sometimes things need to stop before they arrive, so we can all land in the truth. He didn't fully understand the phrase, but he liked how it sounded. Passengers continued whispering. The overhead lights blinked slightly as turbulence rocked the cabin. Malik looked up and saw a child in row 5 staring at him. The boy looked around 9 with curly hair and wide eyes. He waved. Malik waved back. The boy smiled. It was small, innocent, but something about it lifted the air around Malik's chest. For a moment, he wasn't the subject of speculation. He was just a person, seen, acknowledged. With 30 minutes left in the air, Vanessa re-entered the front cabin with another flight attendant. This time, a man in a black vest, clearly nervous. She whispered something to him, then approached Malik again. Mr. Cross, she said, voice firmer this time. We'll be landing soon. Corporate has asked if you'd be willing to speak briefly to media after deplaning. Malik looked at her, jaw slightly clenched. He considered his words. Do they want me to? Make it all sound good. Vanessa looked torn. They want the truth, but maybe not the whole of it. Georgia muttered under her breath. Of course not. Malik's eyes didn't flinch. I'll speak, he said, but not as your employee's son, not as a press tool. Vanessa blinked. I'll speak as someone who was asked to give up his seat for being the wrong kind of first. Then he added, I'll speak and you'll listen. The entire front cabin had gone silent. Vanessa nodded, visibly shaken. Malik could see it. This wasn't about policies anymore. This wasn't about customer service. It was about recognition of harm, of assumptions, of someone who had the right to sit, and still had to prove why. He turned back to the window. The clouds were thinning. The city lights below flickered in a sea of orange and silver. Chicago was near, and with it, a reckoning. He felt no need to prepare a speech. His presence would be the statement, his voice, the punctuation, and the landing that was where the story would truly begin. As the plane began its descent into Chicago, Malik's breath slowed, but his mind did not. He could feel the eyes again, not angry, not hostile, just curious, hesitant. Some looked away when he met their gaze. Others nodded subtly, as if trying to say, "I see you. I didn't know before, but I see you now." The clouds outside parted to reveal a city glittering with 1,000 silent windows. Each one held stories, people, lives untouched by what had happened in the sky above them. But that was about to change. Malik adjusted his seatbelt. Georgia leaned slightly toward him. "Do you want someone by your side when we land?" she asked gently. He smiled, touched by her offer. "Thanks, but I think this one's mine to walk." She nodded. "Well, then you walk tall." The landing gear dropped with a mechanical groan. A few passengers gasped as the plane jolted downward. The tires met the tarmac with a heavy thud. The plane bounced once, then settled. A voice came over the intercom. "Welcome to Chicago Midway. Local time is 7:42 p.m. Please remain seated until the aircraft has come to a complete stop. Our ground team will be boarding shortly." Boarding. The word hung in the air like smoke. Passengers exchanged glances. Everyone had questions now, even the ones who didn't want to ask. From the window, Malik saw them. 3 black SUVs waiting beside a marked security vehicle. An Aurora Atlantic operations van pulled up behind them. And standing tall at the edge of the tarmac, arms folded, sout immaculate, was Dorian Cross, his father. Malik's chest tightened. This wasn't just a visit. This was a statement. The cabin door opened. 2 officials entered, both wearing ID badges. Behind them stood a woman with a firm posture and short natural curls. Her suit was navy. Her expression calm but alert. "Dr. Farrow," Vanessa whispered to herself. They brought in the equity officer. Malik caught that. So they were serious. The captain stepped out of the cockpit and spoke to the passengers. "Ladies and gentlemen, please remain seated. A brief company debriefing will take place before final disembarkation. Certain individuals will be addressed first. We ask for your patience." Malik unbuckled his seatbelt. Vanessa didn't stop him this time. One of the officials nodded toward him. "Mr. Cross," he said, "please come with us." Malik stood. Every movement felt like a drumbeat. Not rushed, not hesitant, deliberate. Georgia whispered, "We'll be right behind you." He glanced at her one last time, grateful. Then he walked forward. The aisle parted around him. No one moved. Not a word was spoken. He passed Vanessa. She didn't meet his eyes. The woman in the navy suit stepped forward once he reached the galley. "I'm Dr. Neela Farrow," she said, "Director of Equity and Passenger Integrity for Aurora Atlantic. Your father asked that I personally escort you." Malik simply nodded. Outside, the cool Chicago air wrapped around him as the stairs lowered from the side of the aircraft. And there he was, Dorian Cross. No entourage, no security flanking him. Just a man, a father, standing still on the concrete like a monument. When Malik reached the bottom of the stairs, Dorian stepped forward and opened his arms. Malik let himself fall into that embrace. For the first time since the incident began, his shoulders softened, not because the pain had vanished, but because someone was holding it with him now. They didn't speak at first. Then Dorian pulled back slightly and looked him in the eye. "You didn't bend," he said softly. "I'm proud of you." Malik managed a faint smile. "I didn't know what else to do." "Sometimes," Dorian said, "not bending is everything." Behind them, Dr. Farrow waited patiently. Several airport staff stood a respectful distance away. The news crews had not yet arrived, though Malik could already see cameras flashing through a terminal window. Dorian turned to Dr. Farrow. "Bring the flight crew forward," he said. "Here. Not in a room. Not behind a door." Malik's eyes widened. "You're doing this?" Here, Dorian didn't flinch. "This happened in public. It gets addressed in public." Minutes later, Vanessa Lang emerged from the aircraft, flanked by the co-pilot and 2 cabin crew members. Troy Beckett followed behind, his face pale, hands buried in his jacket pockets. They formed a half circle around Dorian and Malik. The wind picked up slightly. Dorian didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. "I want everyone here to listen carefully," he began. "This is not a disciplinary hearing. This is not a trial. This is a reckoning." Vanessa looked like she was about to speak, but Dorian lifted one hand. "Don't explain yet. Listen." He stepped aside and motioned toward Malek. "This is my son. You didn't know that at the time. That's not the issue. The issue is that you believed his presence in first class required justification, that you defaulted to assumption before inquiry, that you thought authority meant correctness." Troy shuffled nervously. Dorian's eyes narrowed. "And when you were challenged, you didn't investigate. You escalated." The silence was thick. Dr. Farrow stepped beside Dorian and added, "Bias isn't always shouted. Sometimes it's silent, procedural, polite even, but it still tells someone they're not welcome." Malik didn't say a word. His silence was no longer quiet. It was powerful. Vanessa finally spoke, her voice breaking. I didn't recognize what I was doing. I've worked here 12 years. I treat everyone the same." Dorian looked at her with sadness more than anger. "No, you treated everyone equally until someone didn't fit the picture in your head. Equality is not equity, and your choices told my son he didn't belong where he already was." Vanessa's eyes filled with tears. "I'm sorry," she whispered. Malik stepped forward for the first time. "I forgive you," he said, "but I don't forget, because someone else like me might sit here next week, and I need to know they won't be asked to explain their existence." Troy looked down. The co-pilot spoke. "I never said a word, but I should have." Dorian nodded once. "Silence is the oldest accomplice," he said. He turned back to Malik. "Come," he said. "Let's go meet the cameras." Malik blinked. "What am I supposed to say?" Dorian placed a hand on his shoulder. "The truth. The whole of it. Don't defend me. Don't defend the airline. Just speak what happened and how it felt. That's more than enough." Malik hesitated. Then he nodded. As they walked toward the media cluster forming near the terminal, Malik glanced back once more. Vanessa stood by the stairs, hands folded, tears streaking her cheeks. Troy leaned against the service van, hollow and speechless. And Georgia stood inside the cabin doorway, watching him, hands clasped over her heart. The wind carried nothing now, just the sound of footsteps, of reckoning, of healing, and Malik knew. The ground didn't mean the journey was over. Sometimes it was where the real flight began. Bright lights. That was Malik's first impression. As he and Dorian crossed the tarmac toward the designated media area, the blinking of red lights and the flashing of camera bulbs painted the runway in a strobe of tension. Reporters gathered behind the security tape. their microphones raised like weapons of curiosity. But it wasn't hostile. It was expectant. Behind them, Dr. Farrell walked calmly, flanked by a public liaison officer. She was coordinating something with a staff member on a tablet. But Malik didn't hear the logistics. All he heard was his own heartbeat and the wind sliding past his ears. Dorian paused just a few feet before the microphones. He turned to his son. "You sure you're ready for this?" Malik breathed slowly. "No, but I'm sure it needs to be done." Dorian smiled with pride. "That's enough." Then he stepped back, motioning to the liaison. "He speaks first." Alone. A murmur rippled through the reporters. Several adjusted their microphones. The Aurora Atlantic backdrop was hastily positioned behind the portable podium. A tiny logo repeated a dozen times. Malik stepped forward. At first, he saw no faces, just a wall of lenses and lights. But then, he focused on a single person, a woman in her 40s, no camera crew, just a notebook in hand. She wasn't shouting. She was just watching. That steadied him. He didn't read from a card, didn't unfold a statement. He just spoke. "My name is Malik Avery Cross. I'm 17 years old, a high school senior. I love photography, history, and I play jazz trumpet. My mom says I have my dad's smile. And 3 hours ago, I was kicked out of a first-class seat I was legally, rightfully assigned." He paused. "I didn't shout. I didn't resist. I asked a question. The response was to call security." He heard the gas ripple through the line. "I was told someone else needed the seat more. That someone else turned out to be white, older, dressed in a suit. No documents were checked. No questions were asked. No apology was offered. Only when my last name was known did the flight crew realize what I already knew." He leaned forward slightly. "That I belonged there. Flashbulbs popped. But this isn't just about me. I'm not here because I'm the CEO's son. I'm here because I know what it feels like to be asked to shrink. To be told you are too much for the space you occupy. That people like you must make room even when you earned the room." He let that settle. "I'm not angry. I'm not trying to destroy anyone's life. But I want people to understand that bias doesn't always wear a badge or carry a slur. Sometimes it comes in the form of policy, of assumptions, of someone making a decision in a second that echoes for hours." He looked directly into one of the main cameras. "My name is Malik, and I didn't ask to be a moment. But I will make sure this moment matters." He stepped back. The silence that followed was almost reverent. Even the reporters hesitated, unsure whether to clap or continue. Dorian stepped forward now, his tone calm but firm. "This company is not defined by its planes. It's defined by its people. And today, my people failed my son. But failure, acknowledged, is the first step toward change." He gestured to Dr. Farrow. "This is Dr. Neela Farrow, effective immediately. She will lead a new audit of all passenger interaction policies, all staff training protocols, and report directly to an independent review board. This review will be public, transparent, and more importantly, shaped by the voices of those most affected." A reporter finally shouted a question. "Mr. Cross, what about the crew involved? Are they being terminated?" Dorian nodded. "The individuals directly involved will be placed on administrative leave pending full review. Some have already submitted resignations." Another question followed. "Is this just PR cleanup, or are you admitting systemic bias within your airline?" Dorian's eyes didn't blink. "I'm acknowledging systemic bias across the entire industry. And we're not going to wait for legislation to fix what human dignity demands right now. Doctor? Farrow spoke next, her voice cool and precise. We'll be partnering with advocacy groups, civil rights organizations, and former passengers with lived experience to redesign the lens through which we see service. Equity isn't optional. It's overdue. Cameras clicked again. Behind them, Malik stood just outside the spotlight's center, feeling something stir inside. It wasn't triumph. It wasn't justice. Not yet. But it was motion. Later that evening, seated inside a quiet terminal room, Malik finally allowed himself to rest. Georgia had reached out via email. Her message was short but warm. You gave us all permission to see clearer today. Thank you. He smiled. Troy Beckett, the supervisor, had sent an official apology. Malik didn't read the whole thing, but he saw the closing sentence. I'm reflecting, and I hope you never have to teach another grown man how to see someone's worth again. Vanessa Lang hadn't written, but her silence felt different now. Malik sat across from his father at a small coffee table. You think anything really changes after all this? He asked. Dorian sipped slowly. Not everything, he said, but someone. Malik tilted his head. That's not enough. No, Dorian said, but it's a start. They sat in silence a while. Then Malik pulled out his phone, opened the camera app, pointed it toward the glass wall overlooking the Chicago skyline. He zoomed in on a single street lamp glowing in the dusk. Click. Dorian raised an eyebrow. Trying to capture the city, Malik shook his head. No, just the light that stayed on. Dorian didn't say anything, but he understood. The next morning, the headlines began. CEO's son exposes airline bias, mid-flight company grounds itself in public reckoning. Young man denied seat speaks with poise. Promises change. From silence to spotlight. Teen passenger sparks industry reform. Some called it corporate drama. Others called it history. But for Malik, it was still personal. Not a victory parade. Not a courtroom battle. Just a boy who asked, why can't I sit here in a world that had to answer? The following days unfolded like slow-moving waves. What had begun as a private humiliation at 30,000 feet had now rippled through news cycles, boardrooms, and dinner tables across the country. Malik tried not to watch every interview, but he heard the sound bites anyway on car radios, in school hallways, and whispered between the walls of his own home. Some were supportive, others skeptical. In a cafe near his school, two older men debated loudly over coffee. I mean, maybe the kid was just sitting in the wrong seat. One said, these things happen. His friend replied, he was in the right seat. The problem is, they didn't think he belonged in it. Malik sat quietly in the back corner. Hoodie up, earbuds in, volume off. He didn't interrupt. He just listened. He was listening more than ever now. Not just to words, to silences. To what wasn't being said. At school, things were different. Some teachers treated him with sudden reverence, as though his mere presence demanded higher moral alertness. Others avoided eye contact entirely. His classmates varied. Amira, his lab partner, fist bumped him the first day back. You lit the sky up. Cross, proud of you. But Evan, who had always been friendly in the hallway, now said little more than hey and even that. Reluctantly, the incident had divided people, not just over what happened, but over what it meant. One morning, Malik entered the media room early to work on his photography project. The advisor, Mr. Chen, was already inside, printing proofs. He looked up. You've been quiet lately, he said. Malik shrugged. Just trying to breathe. Mr. Chen paused, then said, "You know, the photo you submitted for the winter showcase, the one of the old man on the bench, under that dying tree, it hit me different now. Why, 'cause I realized you weren't just showing what you saw. You were showing what you felt." Malik didn't respond right away. "Then that's what all of this feels like now. Everyone's looking at what they saw, but only a few are feeling what it was." Mr. Chen nodded. "Then don't stop showing them." Later that afternoon, Malik got a text from his dad. "You'll be asked to speak at the board's internal review hearing. Just a statement. No pressure. Let me know if you're up for it." Malik stared at the screen. He didn't reply right away. He sat on a bench outside the library for almost an hour. Part of him wanted to say no, to let it pass. He had already said enough. But another part deeper, firmer, knew that silence now would feel like consent. That night, he sat at his desk and began to write. Not a speech, just thoughts, sentences, fragments, questions. He wrote, "I wasn't angry until they made me explain why I existed in that seat. And if my father weren't who he is, I would have left that plane feeling like nothing. And every time you ask someone to prove their worth, you reveal more about your own fears than their identity." He didn't know which part he'd share yet, but he was building toward something. The hearing was scheduled for Friday. Malik arrived in a charcoal blazer, no tie, clean sneakers. He didn't want to perform. He wanted to be himself. The boardroom was large, glass-walled, overlooking the Chicago skyline. 12 executives sat spaced out, flanked by consultants, legal advisors, and PR staff. Dorian was there, too, but seated quietly in the corner. He had already made clear this was not his platform. It was Malik's. "Doctor," Farrow greeted him at the door. "Speak from the place that never needed permission," she whispered. Malik stepped up to the single microphone at the front. He inhaled once, then again, and began. "When I was 10, I asked my mom why some people lock their car doors when we walk by." His voice was clear, not loud. She said, "Because some people are taught to fear what they never tried to understand." He looked around the room. "I didn't come here to accuse. I came here because what happened to me is not rare. It's just rarely exposed." He continued, "I was seated in first class. Legally, quietly. The crew assumed I didn't belong. They acted on that assumption. That is not a misunderstanding. That is a pattern." He paused. "I don't need sympathy. I need policy." A few board members shifted in their seats. "I need training that doesn't just say treat everyone equally, but asks, why do you assume this person is different?" He took one final breath. "And if I had gotten off that plane quietly, if I had swallowed it like generations before me, would we even be sitting here?" He stepped back. Silence. Then applause restrained. Professional, but real. Afterward, as he was walking toward the elevator, one board member, an older woman with silver hair and soft eyes, stopped him. "Thank you," she said quietly. "My grandson is biracial. I want him to live in a world where stories like yours feel like fiction." Malik nodded. "Me too. Later." As he rode home in the back seat of the family car, he looked out at the lights again. They blurred a little this time, but he let them. He didn't need everything to be sharp just yet, just honest. And for the first time in a while, he leaned back and slept. 2 weeks passed. The media frenzy began to settle. Malik noticed it in small ways. First, fewer articles shared in the group chats, fewer whispers when he passed by lockers, and fewer glances from adults trying to see something noble in him they had ignored before. But not all the echoes had quieted, because the truth has a long shelf life, and stories, once spoken from a place of truth, continue breathing even when the cameras turn off. On a gray Wednesday afternoon, Malik received an unexpected email. Subject line: "If you'll hear me." It was from Vanessa Lang. He didn't open it right away. He stared at it for nearly 20 minutes, then walked away, made tea, took a walk around the block, came back, stared again. Finally, he opened it. "Malik, I know I am the last person you expected to hear from or want to, and I do not ask for forgiveness. That would be selfish. What I ask is a little space to say what I didn't when I should have. I was wrong, not just about you, but about what I represent when I put that uniform on. I have worked in this industry for 12 years, and I've seen bias happen. I've heard it in the quiet comments in the galley. I've watched it in who gets offered help first. I convinced myself I wasn't part of the problem because I wasn't the worst offender. But that day, I became the thing I thought I'd never be. You were kind, calm, patient. I was none of those things, and I responded to your presence as a threat not because of what you did, but because of what I had failed to unlearn. You shouldn't have had to carry that. Not at 17. Not ever. I am resigning from my position at Aurora Atlantic. It is not a move made under pressure. It is a choice I made so no other passenger has to feel unseen the way you did. I will not try to justify my actions. I only hope this letter helps in some small way. With regret." Vanessa Lang Malik didn't cry, but he felt something shift. A heavy door creaked open inside him, letting light into a room he didn't know had darkened. He sat in silence for a while, then forwarded the email to his dad, with just one line attached. "I needed this more than I thought I did." The next morning, "Dr. Farrow called. "We've just finished the draft of the new initiative." She said, "It's bold, and we want you to be the one to help us launch it." "What is it?" Malik asked. She explained. The new Aurora Atlantic Passenger Equity Program would be called Seat at the Table. It wasn't just another policy revision. It was a cultural overhaul. All flight crew, from captains to cabin staff, would receive immersive, scenario-based training rooted in lived experience, not checklists. Passenger incident review panels would include an independent ombudsman, a social equity officer, and a rotating seat held by former passengers of color who had experienced discrimination in flight, and perhaps most significantly. Aurora would begin a pilot program placing anonymous observers on random flights, trained to document behavior patterns in real time, not to punish, but to correct, guide, and retrain. It was ambitious, controversial, and Malik was being asked to record a message to be shown in orientation for all new Aurora Atlantic hires. He thought hard before answering. "Only if I get to write the script." "Dr." Farrow smiled. That was the hope. That weekend, Malik returned to the airport, not to fly, just to observe, to feel the space again. He walked through Terminal 4 slowly, wearing jeans and a hoodie, baseball cap pulled low. No one stopped him this time. No one stared too long. He was just a teenager moving through space, until someone tapped him on the shoulder. It was a young girl, maybe 13, black, with large round glasses and a nervous smile. Her mother stood a few feet back, unsure whether to approach. "Are you the boy from the plane?" she asked. Malik hesitated. "Yeah," he said softly. The girl pulled something from her bag, a sketchbook. She opened it to a page. It was a drawing charcoal, loose but textured, of a boy sitting alone at a window seat. with storm clouds outside the window and sunlight creeping just along the edge of the frame. "I drew this after I watched your video," she said. "You looked so calm and sad, but not broken." Malik stared at the drawing for a long time. "Thank you," he whispered. Her mother came forward. "We just wanted to say thank you for standing up, for speaking. It meant something." Malik didn't know what to say, so he did something instead. He took a pen from his backpack and wrote his email on the inside cover of her sketch pad. "Keep drawing," he said. "You see more than most people ever will." That night, as he sat at his desk writing the orientation script, Malik paused halfway through a sentence. He realized he had been holding his breath for years, not just during that flight, but across a lifetime of small slights, unspoken rules, warnings wrapped in advice from well-meaning adults. Be careful what you say. Don't look too confident. Always explain yourself before they ask. He remembered a time in 7th grade when his math teacher double-checked his test score in front of the whole class because she didn't expect him to get it all right. He remembered the time in 3rd grade when a museum guard followed him and his cousins for 3 entire exhibits. He remembered his mom squeezing his hand a little tighter whenever a police cruiser passed too slowly. He had never wanted to be a symbol. But now that he had become one even briefly, he could choose what the symbol meant, and he would choose light. Malik stood at gate C-42 watching the final boarding group snake through the jet bridge. This time, he was flying alone. No press, no whispers, no viral cameras waiting to capture a moment. Just a teenager with a carry-on and a boarding pass tucked neatly inside a leather wallet. He exhaled slowly, brushing a thumb over the raised letters Aurora Atlantic Airways. New logo, new brand colors, same sky. But something had changed underneath it. Flight 611 to Atlanta. A short hop, but a meaningful one. This was the first flight since the new initiative launched, and Malik was flying as part of a quiet observer mission. Not undercover, just present, invited, informed, trusted. His seat 1A. He hadn't asked for it. In fact, he had initially declined the upgrade. But Dr. Farrow insisted. Not because of status, she'd said, but because your story made this seat more honest. As Malik stepped onto the aircraft, the flight attendant greeted him with a smile. Genuine, soft-eyed, no performance behind it. "Well, welcome aboard, Mr. Cross. Let me know if you need anything." He nodded. "Thank you." He settled into 1A, quietly placing his backpack under the seat in front. He didn't even flinch when a middle-aged white man sat beside him. The man offered a nod and a polite smile. Malik returned it. It felt normal. Not perfect, not euphoric, but safe. And for the first time in a long while, that was enough. The engines rumbled to life as the plane pushed back from the gate. The safety video played with new voiceovers, including a segment featuring Dr. Farrow briefly outlining the seat at the table commitment. Malik glanced out the window. The tarmac blurred, the sky opened, and the flight lifted. 10 minutes into cruising altitude, the cabin lights dimmed. Malik closed his eyes for a moment. Not to sleep, just to breathe. And then he heard it, a soft, uncertain voice behind him. "Excuse me, is this Malik?" He turned gently. A young man, maybe early 20s, stood near the front galley. Tall, skin the color of walnut, nervous, shifting from foot to foot. "I didn't mean to interrupt," he said. I recognized you from the training video. I just joined Aurora. This is my 3rd flight as crew." Malik sat up slightly. "Oh, wow," he said. "Congrats." The young man smiled, more relaxed now. "My name's Jaden. When I saw your story, I decided to apply. I didn't think I belonged in aviation, but something about what you said about presence being a form of resistance, it stayed with me." Malik's heart fluttered in his chest. Jaden continued, "I just wanted you to know, you didn't just change policy. You made people like me believe we had a place here." Malik stood and shook his hand. "I'm glad you're here, Jaden." The moment passed like warm wind, quiet, powerful, full of invisible weight. As Jaden returned to the galley, Malik sat down again, looking at his hands. He thought about how many times he had clenched them, hidden them, folded them in defense. Now, they were open. There was something sacred in that. When the flight landed in Atlanta, Malik was among the last to deplane. He wasn't in a hurry. As he stepped into the terminal, his phone buzzed. A message from his mom. "Saw your photo on the company's new brochure. You look so much like your grandfather. I wish he could see what you're doing." Malik smiled, blinking back the sting in his eyes. His grandfather, Elijah Cross, had been a train conductor in Mississippi who wasn't allowed to use the front entrance of the depot until 1973. He died in 2009, still carrying the quiet weight of too many doors closed without reason. Malik typed back, maybe he couldn't sit in the front, but now his grandson flies in seat 1, not because of luck, but because the door stayed open. His mom replied with a single blue heart emoji. That evening, Malik attended a youth roundtable hosted at a local college. He wasn't there to speak, just to listen. But when one student mentioned that boy from the plane, someone gestured toward Malik, and the room filled with murmurs. A facilitator asked gently, "Would you like to say something?" Malik hesitated, then stood. "I don't know if I have the right words," he began, "but I know what silence does, and I know what being seen feels like." He paused. "I never asked to be a symbol. I just wanted to sit in my seat. That's all most people want, not special treatment, just the absence of suspicion." He continued, more certain now. "I think change happens in 3 ways. First, when someone tells the truth. Second, when someone listens without interrupting. And third, when systems bend enough to make space for what was ignored." A long silence followed, and then applause. Not performative, not explosive, just real, the kind that lands softly, like rain on thirsty soil. After the event, as Malik walked alone down a quiet Atlanta street, he passed a bookstore with an old sign in the window. Dignity is a seat no one should have to earn. He stopped and stared and smiled, because somewhere between that gate in Chicago and this block in Atlanta, he had begun to understand something vital. The seat was never just about comfort. It was about worth. And worth, once claimed, changes everything. 2 months later, Malik stood on the observation deck at Aurora Atlantic headquarters. From this height, the runways looked like ribbons, planes like patient birds waiting for the sky's permission. The air was clear that day, and you could see far past the terminal gates, beyond the hangars, even out to the faint shimmer of the highway in the distance. Behind him, inside a glass-walled auditorium, the company was preparing to host its first Global Dignity and Travel Summit, an event born from a single incident, now grown into something larger than any one person. And Malik, he wasn't just a guest anymore. He was the opening speaker. The stage crew had asked him earlier if he needed a teleprompter. He declined, not because he had something rehearsed, but because what he needed to say wasn't scripted. It lived in his chest. He stood quietly behind the curtain for a moment, listening as Dr. Nyla Farrow introduced him. And so it is with tremendous respect that we welcome the young man who reminded us all of what dignity feels like, Mr. Malik Avery Cross. Applause rose as he stepped forward. The lights weren't blinding. The room wasn't too big. And the silence was full of listening. Malik adjusted the mic gently. "I'm 17, he began. "So, I don't pretend to have answers that grown adults have spent decades looking for. But I do know what injustice feels like. I've lived it, and I've watched how fast people try to make it quiet." He paused, scanning the room. 2 months ago, I was removed from a seat I had every right to sit in. Not because I broke a rule, but because someone looked at me and saw a story they made up in their head. A few heads nodded in the crowd. I wasn't angry. Not at first. I was embarrassed. I was small. I was tired. Tired of being the one who had to stay calm so other people could stay comfortable. He let that sink in. I've been asked if I'm proud of what happened next. And the truth is, no, because it never should have happened in the first place. A deeper silence followed. "But what I am proud of," he continued, "is what we did with it." He gestured gently around the room. "This summit isn't a celebration of a viral video. It's a challenge. It's a mirror. It asks how many voices didn't make it to a camera. How many people walked off a plane carrying wounds no one saw? A woman in the third row wiped her eyes. This isn't about politics. It's about presence, about who feels welcome when they walk through the gate, about whether a last name or a skin tone or a hoodie decides your worth." He looked down for a breath, then back up again. "When my father grounded that flight, people said it was power. But I've learned something. Real power isn't the ability to stop a plane. Real power is keeping the door open for everyone, even when it's easier to look away." He stepped back slightly, hands clasped. "I hope this summit leads to policy. But more than that, I hope it leads to pause. I hope the next time a flight attendant sees a young black kid in seat 1A, they don't ask if he's in the right place. I hope they ask if he'd like water, or a blanket, or a smile." A quiet laugh rippled through the crowd. "And I hope," he said, voice steady, "that somewhere out there, a kid who looks like me watches this and decides to take up space anyway. Even if it's uncomfortable, even if it's questioned, even if the seat was never built with him in mind." He ended simply, "My name is Malik Cross, and I'm not here because I was kicked out of a seat. I'm here because I stayed standing." The room rose to its feet. No cheers, just deep applause, the kind that reverberates through skin and memory. Backstage, Dorian waited with a small smile. When Malik stepped off the stage, his father didn't say anything right away. He just pulled him into a hug. "You made it bigger than me," Dorian whispered. "Bigger than the airline." Malik exhaled into the space between them. It always was. Later that evening, as twilight stretched long over the airfield, Malik walked alone past the hangars. He stopped by the tail of an Aurora aircraft, painted in the new livery soft navy and bronze, with the company's new motto along the body: "Every seat, every story, every soul." Malik touched the cool metal gently. It no longer felt like a battlefield. It felt like beginning again. A ground crew member walked by and did a quick double take. "Hey, you're him?" "Right." Malik smiled. "Yeah, I guess I am." The man grinned, tugging at his badge. "Thanks for what you did. You changed the way we see each other out here." Malik nodded. "Keep it going?" As he turned back toward the terminal, his phone buzzed again. A message from Maya Jensen, the woman who had recorded that first flight. She hadn't posted anything since the incident. She told Malik she wanted her role to fade, not center herself. But tonight, she'd written, "Watched your speech. I cried in my kitchen. Thank you for turning something ugly into something sacred. Let me know if you ever want to make a film about it. Real stories deserve real light." He smiled, typed back, "Let's talk, but only if it ends with someone like Jaden in the cockpit." He didn't wait for a reply, because he didn't need a next viral moment. He just needed the door to stay open. And this time, it would. Not just for him, but for everyone. He didn't scream. He didn't fight. He just stood, and then he stayed standing. Malik Cross's story isn't about one flight. It's about all the invisible flights we've taken where dignity was the baggage left behind. When a black teen is removed from first class for simply existing, we are forced to ask what systems allowed it, what silences protected it, and who finally said, enough, through courage, compassion, and quiet resolve. Malik and his father didn't just respond, they rebuilt. A new policy, a new culture, a new future. But the question still echoes. How many others never got to finish their flight? How many were denied not just a seat, but humanity? This story is a tribute to them, to the kids who are taught to shrink, to the parents who fight battles behind closed doors, to the workers who speak up when no one else does, and to every soul that knows justice doesn't always shout sometimes. It walks down a jet bridge with its head held high. If this story moved you, like, share, and subscribe, so we can keep telling stories that matter, stories that stir hearts, challenge silence, and remind the world that every seat, every soul, deserves respect. We'll see you in the next flight.